are. So welcome everyone to the forum on the future of heritage. My name is Megan Walsh. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm the acting executive director of the Capital Heritage Connection. I would like to start off by recognizing that we are broadcasting here from the National Capital Region, which is located on the traditional and unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation. We extend our respect to the many Indigenous connections, past, present, and future, from First Nations to Inuit to Mentee peoples on this territory. I'm just going to quickly go through these reminders on the screen here, just as some Zoom kind of housekeeping. So if at any point you're experiencing any technical issues, you can consult Zoom's help site, which will pop into the chat for you. And I've popped it into the chat of the lobby, so it should always be there for you. And you can also email us at info@capitalheritage.ca, and we will do our best to help you solve any problems that you're having. We also invite everyone to include their pronouns in their screen names, as well as to use your pronouns and introduce yourself using those during the networking session. If you have a question at any point, you can use the Q&A function. We'll be using that for the Mentee insights as well as for the panel discussion coming up in the second session. So I'm very, very glad to start off this first session. So we'll just be doing some welcoming remarks and then move on to our Mentee Insight presentations. I see quite a few familiar faces and names. So I know a lot of you are familiar with Capital Heritage Connection, but just in case there are some of you who aren't as familiar and who are joining us for the first time, welcome, of course. And I'll just let you know a bit about Capital Heritage Connection. So we are an umbrella organization. We serve large organizations, small organizations, businesses, and individuals who are interested in the history and heritage of the greater capital area. So we have our wonderful, wonderful membership that we serve. We provide training and any kind of support that they could need so that they can support our wonderful National Capital Heritage community. Specifically, while we're here tonight, is because of our wonderful Capital Heritage Mentorship Program. And this program connects experienced senior managers in the heritage sector, the broader cultural sector, with new graduates wishing to embark on a career in heritage, as well as emerging professionals who wish to move their career onto the next level. This initiative helps bridge the gap by providing emerging professionals with opportunities to learn new skills and explore different career paths in the National Capital Region. And we are very grateful and lucky enough to be able to include in this mentorship program two internships, two paid internships, thanks to the wonderful support of the Ottawa Community Foundation. On top of those mentorship and intern relationships that we connect in this program, we're also able to provide some workshops and some training. So this year we were very lucky to have 5 different workshops. So you should be able to see them up on the screen here. We had 5 workshops over the 5 months of the wonderful CHMP. The first workshop, Building New Personal Branding and Digital Networking for Heritage Professionals, was presented by Trina Stanford. Level Up Your Heritage Job Hunt was presented by Madeline Smollers. Informational Interviews and Job Interviews in the Heritage Sector was presented by John Summers. Work Stress and Burnout was presented by Nina Nesdoli of Workplace Clarity. And just last week, we had a really engaging, wonderful workshop, Leading Through Equity, presented by Shaliza Jamal of Curated Leadership. And I just want to take this opportunity to thank all of our wonderful workshop presenters from this year. I think I can speak for our mentees and mentors that everyone really enjoyed every single presentation, whether they were able to join it live or watch the recordings. And we really appreciate the time that they gave, as well as the flexibility in terms of finding some schedule times that work for as many folks as possible. And I'll continue on with the thank yous. Of course, we want to thank our wonderful mentors from this year. Michael Rickley Lancaster from the Mississippi Valley Textile Museum, Emily Keys from No History, Rodney Nelson from Carleton University, and Kareem Ali from Latin Sparks Festival. We, of course, wouldn't be able to do this program without you. And I know the mentees appreciate the time and the effort and all of the advice that you gave of yourselves and that you shared with them throughout these 5 months. And hopefully those connections and those experiences can continue on past the program as well. We would also, of course, are so grateful to the Ottawa Community Foundation. They provide the funding for this program through a multi-year grant. We wouldn't be able to have this program without them either. And especially those 2 paid internship positions are so important for folks just starting out, and especially to make the sector and the National Capital Region more accessible to everybody. And lastly, we would like to thank Simba. Simba is the intern management software company that we partnered with. This software allows us to connect with our mentees and our mentors, provide resources, and is just a great touch point for everyone in the program to connect over the 5 months. So thank you everyone for all of your support for the program. And now, without further ado, I'm going to pass it off to our project coordinator, Sam Gardner, who is going to get us started with the Mentee Insight presentations. Take it away, Sam.
Okay, thank you, Megan. Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm not going to talk for very long because there are other people with more important things to say. So I am going to hand things straight away over to Justin, who is going to lead the charge with the first of our mentee presentations. So take it away, Justin.
Okay, cool. So bear with me when I just try to share my screen for the PowerPoint presentation here, because yeah, haven't had to do this in a little bit. Okay, cool. Okay, there we go. Can everyone see it okay? Sounds good. So, hi, for those of you who are unaware, like my name's Justin. I did my, as you can clearly see on screen, I did my internship at the Mississippi Valley Textile Museum with Michael Rickley Lancaster. Yeah, no, just honestly had a blast working with him the past couple of months. And yeah, cool. So let's get into this. Okay, so like I said, just intern there. So over the course of this presentation, I'm just gonna, I don't know, just talk a bit about what I experienced, like what I got to do. Got to talk about networking. I did honestly a metric ton of scanning, so just get into a bit more depth into that a little bit later. Got to do a bunch of behind the scenes stuff, so like I got to work with any parts of the collection, which I really enjoyed, and I also luckily I also got to do a little bit of exhibit work too, so I definitely enjoyed that. Cool. So networking. So gonna lead with this one mostly because when I talked with Sam, he said no one's really at least as far back as 2 weeks ago, he said no one's really going to talk about this, or not in that great of detail. So hey, let's do this. So honestly, this was more of my secondary thing, but still, so like ever since I graduated from my college program about, like just under 2 years ago, or not 2 years, but more like just ever since I graduated from my college program under a year ago, sorry, more like 11 months, but I quickly realized that networking is kind of important, especially in the museum industry, because hey, let's be honest here, people talk, people really get to know each other. And yeah, I did have a museum job before this, but that was way over in Halifax. Don't really have too many connections to the museum world here in Ottawa, or at the very least, the National Capital Region. So yeah, it was yeah, I kind of needed something. I needed some way somehow to get my foot in the door, and networking is kind of important because, well, hey, turns out, funnily enough, I'm not actually the one who first stumbled across this, like this the job ad for this, right? It was actually my partner who who initially got the job ad through her college program, right? And she passed that off to me, saying, "Oh, hey, just saying this might be a good opportunity for me." So I applied. Hey, luckily not, and hey, luckily enough, I managed to get the internship, right? Uh, so yeah, like for the 5 months I was working in this when I was doing this internship, sorry, just networking was always on my mind. I figured, okay, I definitely need to try to at least try to network with other people, or at the very least, I could probably squeeze Michael for a pretty good reference, right? If I, you know, do good enough job at this. So yeah, luckily I think I managed to accomplish that goal pretty well, and yeah. Okay, so now on to the actual tests in hand, my primary roles and responsibilities. Like you said a few minutes ago, just scanning stuff. So my main task was working with the Pakenham General Store receipt booklets from 1930s, 40s, and maybe 50s, but yeah, no, just from that general time period, right? Very interesting stuff, but yeah, no, my main task was grabbing two at a time because it's a little scanner. Grabbing two at a time, scanning each and every page in it, in the booklet, taking them out. Well, then I'd initially just wrap them in acid-free tissue, combine the scans into a PDF. Then I would color correct the scans and then crop them down so it's just like one scan per PDF. That doesn't sound too bad, and quite frankly, it wasn't. But it's a little bit time consuming because each and every booklet has about 50 pages per booklet. So needless to say, very happy that Michael let me listen to some music while I was doing this. But still some very interesting stuff, right? Just looking through, and I've got an example of the three booklets that I worked with just right up on the screen here. It's honestly, it might have been tedious, but it's also pretty interesting at the same time, right? It's just, yeah, this definitely took up about 60–70% of my time when I was working there just at the museum. So yeah. Okay, cool. So going to get into some collections work right now. So honestly, I did this throughout the internship, but I mostly did this throughout the latter half. So like I want to say January on, helped a bit more out with prepping the exhibits, right? So mostly included just helping to move objects and artifacts around as needed, as Michael saw fit, and just assisted with some miscellaneous tasks just here and there. But probably one of my more notable exhibits work that I did was so this one day about a month or so ago, like for one of the exhibits, Michael wanted us to stuff a bunch of burlap sacks, like it's pretty big, almost giant burlap sacks full of those, full of packing peanuts, right? So that was definitely interesting. So initially, we had the burlap sacks and the very giant bags packing peanuts on two different floors. So what we ended up doing was one of my coworkers and I, we were tasked with bring the giant bags of packing peanuts up to the second floor. That doesn't sound so hard, but of course there's always something, right? Luckily, the museum does indeed have an elevator, but the thing about this elevator is it's not exactly the largest elevator, and it's not exactly the fastest elevator. So yeah, so like pretty much what we did was we grabbed about 3, maybe 4 bags, sorry, at the same time, stick them in the elevator, go up to the second floor, then just take one, then just take one of the bags with us. But as you can see through that photo, I didn't always do that. But right around I want to say 2, maybe 3, I decided, you know what, I want to expedite the process. So I tried grabbing 2 at the same time and tried carrying it to where we were stuffing the bags, right? But just so we're clear, as you can clearly see from the photo, those are some pretty giant bags of packing peanuts, and carrying 2 at a time, let's say, probably wasn't the best idea. Luckily, didn't break anything important, didn't break any artifacts or bones or anything, but just so we're clear, didn't have any peripheral vision, could barely see in front of me, and couldn't really hear much of anything. So quickly realized that probably wasn't the best idea. Still got a pretty good photo outfit though, so that was pretty fun. But yeah, no, and as for actually stuffing the bags, it's definitely a multiple person job, right? So one person holds open the bag, the other stuffs it, fun stuff like that, right? So yeah, and here, so there's like at least some of the results, right? So just yeah, so turned out pretty well if you ask me. Okay, so now some collections work. So honestly, one of the first things I did while doing the internship was got to organize the library slash research center. Honestly, ask anyone who knows me. I'm a pretty big book person, so really it wasn't that much of an issue. But still took me a solid day or two to really get everything organized, because apparently it hadn't actually been organized in quite a while. So that was definitely interesting. But like you said before, Michael doesn't really seem to care that I listen to some music while working on it. So at least I had that. But yeah, no, just definitely enjoyed checking out some of the books that are in the reference that are in the reference center while I was doing this, because hey, might as well, right? So I also got to help. I also got to help organize one of the collections room, right? So this was maybe a few weeks ago. I want to say like middle of March, but just doing my usual thing, scanning stuff, and all of a sudden, Michael, one of my coworkers come up, he might help us organize one of the rooms. So hey, figured something to do, right? So yeah, no. So we spent a few hours in the morning just trying to organize everything. That's actually. Yeah, so the second photo, like the bottom photo right there, that's what took the photo of, right? So just organized some of the artifacts that we had in there, just put a bunch of those steel rods just in their place, so for future use, that sort of thing. Aside from that, also got to so just like with the exhibit works, move artifacts around as needed. Like another story behind that is just we have so in our collection we have about so we have a good like 20 or so coverlets that are just out and need to be just organized or just rolled up. But up until we actually do that, or they're just out and on tables, right? So whenever they need to be moved for whatever reason, it's definitely a multiple person job. So yeah, no, like myself and 3 other people would usually just buddy up and just carry the covering coverlets wherever they need to go, mostly because these things are pretty big and have a good weight to them, so they're just really awkward to carry. Like if it's just like one person carrying it, so it's usually have to do two people per coverlet, or 4 people depending on how big it is. But yeah, no, just pretty fun time, not gonna lie. So yeah, another thing I ended up doing with the collections work is just again a couple weeks back, just needed to move like some quilts from like the upstairs exhibit to to another one of the rooms on the first floor. That's what shows. That's why I took the photo of to the top left photo right there. That I had to move all of those from from the second floor to the bottom. So definitely took a hot minute, but hey, just worth it worth it in the end, right? Another thing, so this is like honestly the last thing I did while working there, while doing my actual while doing the internship. Sorry. So like I said, with the coverlets, we're like eventually those would need to be rolled up. So that's what Michael had me do. So just what I ended up doing was like attaching a bunch of just cardboard tubes together, as you can see in the top left photo right there. Ultimately, I think I end up attaching or like creating about, I want to say around 30 or so of those tubes together. Took me a little bit, but hey, eventually got it done. So eventually I needed to, but see, the thing is, that was actually on the first floor and I needed to bring them up to the second. So yeah, those, I'm not sure if you could tell just by looking at them, but those are pretty big, like much taller than me. So like they're about, I want to say maybe around 7 feet tall, maybe give or take a couple inches. But yeah, so needless to say, they're kind of awkward to carry. They're not heavy or anything. They're just really awkward. Initially, I tried sticking them in sticking a bunch in the elevator just so I could take them up like that. But like I said before, it's not exactly the largest elevator, so it can only really shove, I want to say 3 at a time. If I really push it, maybe 4, but really not efficient. So I tried carrying a couple up. They're just that awkward. I figured, it's gonna take me all freaking morning if I do it by myself. Luckily, I had a couple coworkers willing to lend me a hand to just bring them all upstairs with me. So gotta definitely thank them for that. But yeah, ultimately what I ended up doing with them is that just I started and so Michael ordered like this giant thing of just foam so he could kind of even things out a little bit. So as you can see on the bottom right hand side, so that's what I own. That's what I ultimately ended up doing with them. And just for a reference, just for a reference, in like the kind of bottom center photos, what we're going to do with them to just wrap up the carbolets with those tubes. So yeah, unfortunately, didn't quite get around to doing that because my time ran out. Right, this was, I want to say last week. Sorry, so just my time kind of fell short, so I couldn't quite complete my work there. But just I definitely did about as much as I possibly could with that, considering I only had a couple of days with it. So yeah, and cool. So yeah, so in conclusion, just was able to. I was definitely able to add more skills to my list or to my repertoire. Sorry, definitely enjoyed working and learning about textiles and definitely about the town itself. Really enjoyed working with Michael and and help my other coworkers. And definitely grateful to have this opportunity to meet new colleagues, to definitely expand on my skills, and it never hurts to buff on my resume too. So before I head off, just sad to say, or like really wish Michael was here so I could see the photo, but that's just for reference. That lovely little fellow is Michael's dog, and I managed to snap a quick picture of them before I headed out. So yeah, cool. Just gonna, there we go.
Okay,
Cool.
Thank you so much, Justin. It sounds really interesting, and I was very happy to see the photo of you with the packing peanuts. You had mentioned that to me, and it lived up to the hype. So thank you.
No, it's like just like initially so like you said, or like I was trying to allude to just during that presentation, I really couldn't see much, so didn't actually realize that when my colleagues took that photo until he brought it up a few minutes later. It's like, you know what, this is funny. If anything, I'm definitely putting that photo in the presentation because hey.
Yeah, it was great to see. So thank you.
Yeah.
We will now move on to the second of our interns, Shauna. I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you. So hi, everyone. My name is Shauna Matthews, and I'm one of the mentees who participated in the Capital Heritage Mentorship Program. So I recently moved to Ottawa in September to attend the Applied Museum Studies program at Algonquin College. And not being from Ottawa, I was interested in participating in the mentorship to learn more about heritage and arts organizations in Ottawa, to make connections in the area, and as well to learn new skills. So I completed my mentorship with Kareem Ali, who is the marketing director for Latin Sparks Festival. Latin Sparks Festival is a Latin music and dance festival that is held in both Ottawa and Toronto. And the festival began in 2012 and now attracts more than 10,000 people. But due to the pandemic, they haven't been able to offer in-person events for the last 2 years. So going into the mentorship, I wasn't expecting to be paired with a music festival, since my career goals and experience are more focused within the museum and gallery sector, but I did see it as an opportunity to learn how a different type of arts organization functions and how the different sectors can learn from each other. My mentorship with Kareem largely took the form of informal conversations about various topics that are applicable to most arts organizations, such as grant writing, marketing, and community building. I was particularly interested in learning more about grant writing. It's such an important part of how arts and heritage organizations are able to operate, but I haven't had much experience with grant writing so far. Through our conversations, I was able to get a better idea of the entire process of a grant application, what goes into those applications, and balancing the time spent writing grants with creative endeavors and other operations necessary to the function of an organization. So simultaneously with the mentorship, I also completed an internship with Latin Sparks, and that was under the supervision of Carl Caramun, who is the executive director of Latin Sparks. During the internship, I helped with some administrative tasks, but I mainly conducted research for 3 projects that Latin Sparks was just starting and is currently working on. The first project that I worked on was the NFT Academy and Conference, which will be a series of courses that will teach artists about NFTs and how to incorporate them into their work. For those who aren't too sure what an NFT is, basically it's a certificate of authentication attached to a digital file, usually some kind of digital artwork, and it works sort of like a print edition. They operate on the idea of scarcity, that there's only a limited number available, and that is what drives their value up. So my task with this project was to find people who are involved with NFTs in Canada, such as artists, collectors, and influencers that could potentially lead or teach some of the courses in the NFT Academy. This research allowed me to better my understanding of what an NFT actually is. I was aware of them before, but I never really understood how they worked or their purpose, really. It was interesting to see how artists and other creators are incorporating NFTs into their practice and the types of projects and artworks that are emerging with this new technology. The second project that I worked on was researching ways that the festival could diversify their revenue. The need for this research really came out of the pandemic and not being able to offer in-person events for nearly 2 years, which significantly impact revenue for many festivals and other arts organizations. So with this research, I looked into other ways that the festival could earn revenue that was not reliant on ticket sales. This could be useful for any kind of organization, as having multiple revenue streams can ensure more financial stability and reduces the reliance on only one source of income like ticket sales. And it can provide more of a cushion if that main source of income is immediately taken away. The last project that I worked on was the Digital Innovation Project, which is a capacity building program for small cultural community-based festivals in Ontario. It will feature a series of online courses with a similar format to the NFT Academy courses that aim at teaching skills to create or improve a festival's online presence and their digital marketing tools. My research focused on finding small cultural and ethnic festivals, mostly based in Ontario. And from this, I created a database of festivals that will be contacted or invited to participate in the program. And this project has recently received funding and will be going forward and implemented sometime in this year. So overall, both the mentorship and internship was a really great experience. It exposed me to a type of arts organization that I had never had any experience with before. Though music festivals and museums can be pretty different, it did allow me to see the similarities between the two, as well as things that could be learned from an organization like a music festival. I was able to learn new skills and increase my knowledge about topics such as grant writing that I believe will be transferable and incredibly useful for me in the future. I would like to thank Kareem for being my mentor over the past few months, as well as Carl for taking the time to supervise me during the internship. It was really wonderful working with both of you, and I was able to learn a lot. Thank you.
Thank you, Shauna. That was great to hear, and great to hear your positive experience and the transferable skills you picked up, and things like revenue diversification. I look forward to seeing the fruits of your labors when they come out. So without further ado, we'll move on to the next of our mentees, which is going to be Sammy. Take it away.
All right, I'm just going to figure out sharing my screen quick. Oh, that's not what I meant to do. Okay. Can everyone see my screen? I think it's all loaded up now. Okay, perfect. All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Sammy. And the title for this 5 minutes I'm going to talk to you is some inconclusive answers to the reflections of an emerging public historian. Unlike the two people who spoke before me, I didn't have an internship. I'm in the trenches of my MA public history right now in the last few months, so time is very sparse. So when thinking about how to prepare for this presentation, I thought about what it would look like to come back to where I started when I came into the mentorship program and where I feel like I'm coming out of. So basically, when we were coming to the program, we were asked to identify an issue in heritage and produce a response to it. So kind of playing on what I did for my response, I created a design called Reflections of an Emerging Public Historian. And so this is kind of what I've concluded, but not really concluded coming out of this program. And I think it's important to note that a lot of the questions that I had come from taking my MA in public history in an online format. We got into the program, me and Miranda, who we'll talk after, we both got into the program in March of 2020, right before COVID hit. And then obviously we started the program in September of 2020. And I think it's interesting to be in a digital online format, learning about tangible roles in museums and heritage. And I think it offered a lot of really critical questions that framed a lot of how I approach this mentorship, as well as there are questions I'm still grappling with too. A few of them specifically on here that I'm outlining are how will we integrate more digital learning into museums and heritage sites after COVID-19? Obviously, the next panel will talk a little bit more about that too. What is the responsibility of the museum to address and educate about their colonial origins? I think there's a lot of conversations that started before the pandemic that also are a huge part of what I was grappling with when I entered the program. And so when I approached answering the question, it all kind of came down to one big question about how will museums and heritage sites change and evolve in a post-COVID world? And I think that's something that has really framed the degree, as well as is framing what I think is going to be our role coming out of the programs that we're in. And it was basically what I grounded when I was applying for this program. And I ended with being like, I don't know what the answers are. And I'm hoping these type of questions are still things we're all grappling with when we're coming out of this program and we're in our roles and we are then professionals. And so I think like I said, this reflection should never end. And I think the mentorship really grounded that. My mentor was Emily Keyes, and I think she can attest to the fact that me and Miranda asked a lot of really big, challenging questions. And it was really nice to have dialogues that kind of had open answers and many ways that it could be answered, right? So I kind of grounded this around a lot of the skills we were taught in this mentorship program, not only like form us to be ready to be professionals, but also to continue to ask these questions and build skills in which to actually reflect in concrete ways. So I'm just going to talk about a little bit what those concrete things look like that I learned. So first, obviously, to commit and be open to connecting with others. Definitely a huge part that Justin kind of spoke to a little bit was networking. And I think it's something that always seems a little daunting, reaching out to other people in the field. But I feel like more and more that all the conversations I had with different mentors, my own mentor, as well as in the interviews we got to do, I feel like they're conquering with similar questions that we're working with. And so we're all reflecting, doesn't matter what part of the role you're at, if you're at the executive position to entering the field. And so I think communicating with other people and continuing to connect with people in the field also helps us bridge new ideas and share more, and I think build all of our learning. But then also bringing these conversations outside of the field. There's a lot of interesting dialogue from communities and conversations that we need to be aware of and be bringing into our own practices. Like, we can't only isolate within the history discipline. We need to be looking at what conversations exist outward and also bring those voices and highlight them, as well as bring the authority to them, right? This was definitely something that I feel like the mentorship program taught me. I also think we learned to continue to learn and be vulnerable in identifying places that we need to learn. And I think one huge thing that all the workshops and what we were talking about with Emily on how to prepare for our resumes and CVs and interviews is that there's a real big need for more interdisciplinary skills. And again, I think this goes back to, we can't just stay in the history discipline. We got to be thinking more about how we can accommodate different knowledge levels, different people, bring our programming inward and outward. And that also requires, we think in different ways that exist outside of how we're performing in heritage museum roles now. And then lastly, kind of bringing it all together and bringing it to all our roles and beyond, right? I put the cheesy reach for the stars because I think part of some type of daunting reflection that I had as I was coming into public history is we're working in museums and institutions that are built upon violence. And I think it's important to recognize that violence, but it's hard to think about coming into a small role in a museum and facing a system that is this way and wanting to bring change, but not knowing how, right? And I think a lot of the conversations I had in this program taught me to be more optimistic than I've been being. And that a lot of people are reflecting and asking similar questions and creating more inclusive practices within their own work environments, as well as in how they're presenting histories, that made me feel more optimistic in moving into this field. And I think just to make sure that what you want to do with the field, you engage with that in all the practices you bring, continue to communicate, continue to learn, and that will, I think, transfer into what you're doing at whatever role you're doing in a museum and heritage position. So I guess to conclude, this was very abstract. I definitely recognize it was very abstract, but I think this mentorship program affirmed to me that we're also developing skills on how to reflect and continue to build the field, as well as learning how to build ourselves to be prepared for the field, right? And I think this learning and reflection never ends, but the mentorship program provided me concrete skills and confidence to help me enter this field to make these reflections into tangible changes. So yeah, so that's my presentation, and that's that.
Thank you, Sammy. That was very beautifully presented and some really big and important questions, not just for the heritage sector, but I think for everyone. So thank you. And we'll move on to Miranda now for your presentation.
Thanks, Sam. I'm also going to do the awkward share my screen, talking for a little while, and then it will share eventually. Everyone can see it? Amazing. So today I will be talking to you a little bit about my mentorship experience, particularly how the heritage and cultural sector has sort of been connecting during COVID. So first, a little bit about me. As Sammy mentioned, we are in the same cohort of the Public History MA at Carleton University. I'm currently finishing up some research. I'm making a podcast series about Mechanicsville, a neighborhood here in Ottawa. I view personally history as a story that provides valuable context for how we make sense of our present. And as such, it's important to write history collaboratively and make this knowledge as accessible as possible to the public. I'm passionate about working creatively to help connect people with the past. And a big part of this nowadays is using digital technology. So to enter the mentorship program, I created a podcast episode called Going Digital, all about how the heritage sector has responded to the digital revolution in a public capacity. So how are we changing our programming? How are we evolving our products that we're offering to connect to our audience? During this mentorship experience, I started thinking about how we've responded internally. How are we connecting with each other? How are we meeting new people in different institutions than our own? The main way during the mentorship was our mentorship meeting. So I was lucky enough to be paired with Emily Keys, who once again really rolled with the punches on Sammy and I's questions. We met about once a month since November, and we had a lot of really rich discussions about professional journeys and development. And again, asking the hard-hitting questions that there isn't always answers to, but that are fun to talk about anyway. Near the end of the program, we sort of moved into a hybrid way of connecting, using both online forms of communication and grabbing a coffee in person once it was safe to do so. Overall, I found both ways of meeting to be beneficial. One wasn't necessarily better than the other, but as we all know at this point, there are differences of how we connect online and offline. I think for me, an interesting personal takeaway is that I don't really have a preference either way. It's just a different form of connecting. And I think that's a really interesting a place to get to in the pandemic. I think it's interesting to know that, you know, we can sort of go both ways, which is nice. In addition to the discussions that we also had some really useful resume feedback and sort of job hunting tips from Emily as well, which were invaluable advice. Next sort of piece I want to talk about, one of the huge benefits of being able to connect online as a kind of heritage community is the ability to have conversations that may not have been geographically possible without this technology. So for one of our assignments for the program, we were tasked with reaching out to another mentor and have a little informational interview. So I was lucky enough to chat with Michael from the Mississippi Textile Museum, as Justin mentioned. We had a super interesting conversation about working in local museums and the changes that the pandemic caused, and also board experience, just to name a few points. The quote on the screen is from my reflection after the fact, and while reaching out in these sorts of situations can be scary or terrifying, especially through email, which can be kind of a sterile medium, it's definitely worth it. Without our good friend Zoom, we may not have been able to have this conversation. So I'm really glad that these digital tools exist so that we can have these discussions and connect far beyond our sort of geographical boundaries. The next piece I wanted to talk about is another assignment that we were tasked with. Was a sort of values assessment assignment. So during the pandemic, a lot of us have had the privilege to transition to remote work. And while working from home has given us a lot of time to be on our own, it's also been an opportunity to sort of look inwards and really evaluate our personal values and how this impacts the work that we do. So for this assignment, we did sort of a values quiz and sort of came up with what is most valuable to us. And for me, that turned out to be creativity, helping others, and excitement and fulfillment in the work I do. None of this was extremely surprising, but it was nice to have that sort of concrete knowledge that these are things that I value and this is what I want to bring to my work. And so while working from home can be can be isolating at times, it's also offered a lot of us the time and space to be more introspective and really think about what our work means to us and what we are bringing to the work as well. And I think this sort of personal reflection is really going to help make our industry stronger in the long run. Finally, a workshop that we had most recently was the burnout workshop. So while technology can make it sometimes feel like we can't unplug from work, an email can come in at all hours of the day and or night, and it sometimes feels like we need to be reachable at all times for this sort of communication. So I really appreciated having this final workshop in the program, second to last workshop in the program, to talk about workplace stress and burnout. My main takeaway is that burnout isn't inevitable. Professional development really doesn't have to cost our well-being. And it really made me think about how we as a heritage sector can help balance the important work we do while still supporting employee well-being. Digital tools can help us be a bit more flexible in our working arrangements. So that's one sort of way we can pivot, as long as we're still aware of the boundaries that we need to impose in order to really unplug to enjoy our time offline as much as we enjoy it online, because a lot of us do love the work that we do. My final sort of takeaways in reflecting on the topic of connecting in COVID and how we are connecting internally as much as we are transitioning to sort of digital externally, I've been able to see that this new hybrid world is starting to emerge where we can interact both online and offline. And I'm really excited to see how this continues to shape the way that the heritage and cultural sectors continue to grow and develop both internally and externally. I want to thank everybody who took the time to come out tonight and also to help all of us mentees during this program. It's really been a great experience.
Okay, thank you so much, Miranda. That was great to hear, and it seems like you kind of learned a lot from both the workshops and the assignments, which is really nice to hear from our side. So thank you. I'm going to hand things over to our final mentee presentation of the evening. So Sean, bring it home.
Right, the last awkward share screen. Here we go. Okay, share screen. Oh, there we go. Okay, slideshow. Okay, everybody can see okay? Perfect. Okay. So good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining my presentation this evening, Working Through It, a Museum Professional in a Global Pandemic. I came in as a mentee in the Capital Heritage Mentorship Program 2 years ago after arriving in Ottawa, and 2 years after starting at my current museum, the Diefenbunker Canada's Cold War Museum. After 3 years, I am fortunate enough to be still working at the site through one of the most noteworthy periods of my career. During this time, I was able to discover the resilience of the heritage sector, but also began to seriously review and question how the sector could be doing better for its people and the community. So let's get into it. So how did I get into museums? I've been in the field now since 2013 after a friend suggested to me at the end of my history undergrad to look into museum conservation. I'd never heard of conservation up to that point, and the thought of taking care of and fixing items within a collection sounded like an exciting path to pursue. So returning to North Bay, Ontario, I began volunteering with the local museum before enrolling in Fleming College's Cultural Heritage Conservation and Management Program in 2014. This program gave me the opportunity to learn a very crucial understanding within museums. Without a properly cared for collection, you do not have a museum. It was this understanding that I carried with me into my internship at the Imperial War Museums in the United Kingdom. When I finished, I continued for 2 years at the North Bay Museum in my first paying museum job and began volunteering at the Canadian Forces Museum of Aerospace Defense at the local Air Force Base. It was during this time that I realized my favorite part of the job was actually the storytelling aspect of the museum. And both museums gave me the opportunity to build on this experience. So in 2018, I was accepted into Western University's Public History MA program, and I completed that internship with Parks Canada in Dawson City, Yukon. So a lot of this prepared me for my current position. So I had heard about the Diefenbunker during my undergraduate degree at the University of Ottawa, but I was one of those people who had heard of it, but never really thought to visit. It was really far out of the way. It's about 32 kilometers out, and it's very difficult unless you have a car. But the opportunity presents itself. If the opportunity presents itself, I highly recommend taking the trip. And for those unfamiliar with the history, the site was commissioned in 1958 as per the Diefenbaker government's continuity of government plan. The idea was that in the event of a nuclear attack on the country, key figures in places of authority would continue to operate the country from underground in order to safeguard a policy of national survival. So essentially, we were under attack, but the bureaucracy of everyday life still functioned for the majority of the population. So the site opened in 1962 and was in operation as a military base until 1994, when it was closed and designated a National Historic Site. It was opened as a volunteer-run museum in 1997, showcasing Canada's Cold War and civil defense history. Little did I know how much the museum's themes would become more relevant in the coming years, including emergency preparedness and government messaging. So I joined the team in October of 2019 on contract, working with the visitor experience manager to update the site's storytelling and procuring hardware and translation for a new eight language audio guide. I will preface by saying that this is a fantastic team to work with and has been very important in maintaining a degree of normalcy during the pandemic. The photo seen here shows that we are a fun-loving group and have maintained a positive and supportive environment during a very difficult time, and I'm thankful to be with them. The last of these photos, the one on the right, was taken in December of 2019. So in 2020, on Friday, March 13th, that luckiest of days in the year, I learned we were effectively shutting down our public-facing operations and switching to remote work. I knew a few people who worked this way, but I was unaware of how it was going to work as a museum. Do we lean heavily on digital? Who will take care of the artifacts while we're at home? Will we survive as a site without visitors, our main reason for existence? And finally, the question we're still asking today, how long will this go on for? So fortunately, I was able to stay on as my position was federally funded, but it was disconcerting to see quite a few of the staff being let go, including a newly hired education manager. Our site was venturing into the new normal, and we were finding our feet as we went along. We knew we quickly had to pivot. So thanks in large part to government funding and financial reserves, we were able to continue on and pitch new ideas to form ourselves around what was unfolding. There's a quotation that I've heard that really resonated during this period. So the obstacle is the way. It made it easier to not fall into the difficulties of uncertainty, but rather see how our museum can grow through them. Before the pandemic, I wasn't very savvy at doing AV work, but leaned heavily into it as I knew this would be very important moving forward. So while editing text panels and creating the text or the tracks for each audio guide stop in Audacity, I was learning the ropes with Adobe Premiere Rush. I volunteered to begin making videos, and we began producing video content again for our social media channels. The video on the bottom left was produced for a reopening following the first lockdown in July of 2020. Our message, when you're ready, we're ready for you, hit a chord, and the video has since garnered almost 6,000 views on YouTube. We continued to lean into this content as we sought revenue in remote offerings such as our events and education portfolio. In the bottom right, we put together a 20-minute video tour of the site for our fast-tracked online education programs that launched in the fall of 2021. For events, we paired physical kits with video content. For example, similar to the July promo video, we styled these videos in the 1960s Christmas theme for our holiday cheer whiskey tasting event in December of 2020. For this, we had Santa bartend in different areas of the bunker, talking the viewer through different whiskey cocktails. The event sold out quickly and showed we were capable of putting together events under the circumstances. So eventually we were able to return on site. The project continued throughout the spring of 2020, and we successfully installed new text panels, maps, wayfinding signage, barriers, and finally the audio guides by the end of 2020. One of the examples is on the bottom right, found in the entrance of our blast tunnel. On the left, you will find the current interface of the museum's audio guide, complete with additional multimedia content available in English, French, Spanish, Arabic, German, Mandarin, Russian, and the Baffin Island dialect of Inuktitut. This interface is available both online and on the media players we have on site. This was one of my favorite projects to work on in a museum, especially producing each audio guide track which set the scene for entering the spaces they went into, and it really spoke to my fondness for storytelling. The project also went on to win a 2021 OMA Award of Excellence. So in 2021, having completed the contract, I continued on with the museum as the temporary visitor experience manager. This was my first management position, and I was excited to gain the experience, but I honestly, I was very nervous. I had never been a manager and wasn't sure how I would fit in with the position of authority within a museum. And during a period of unprecedented events, I took a leap of faith. It turned out to be a very rewarding experience, and one of my proudest accomplishments occurred during it. I managed the Artist in Residence program, which had selected Mari Brakupe, the program's first Indigenous artist. Mari focused on a unique aspect of the Cold War. So inspired by our archival collection and titled Akimazanazawin, which is the Algonquian word for an image of the land, Mari's map identifies what the Indigenous nations of the Ottawa region would have considered important to safeguard in the event of a nuclear attack. It puts together a missing piece from the considerations of government officials, creating a dialogue for more inclusive maps. The exhibit was an amazing collaboration, and its opening was the first event held on site at the museum since the pandemic began. Today, almost 3 years later, I am now the research and collections lead at the museum. So during the past 3 years, I have contemplated quite a few noteworthy events that have raised questions about museums and their role in society. Having worked with several Indigenous colleagues within the heritage sector, I was well aware of systemic issues within institutions. I'd known for a long time that a homogenous demographic occupied roles in heritage, especially higher positions. This was magnified exponentially in the resurgence of the Black Lives Matter movement in June of 2020 and the confirmation of unmarked graves in former residential school sites a year later. I also knew that museums were not the most lucrative places to work in. I will not lie, I did and still sometimes do contemplate moving into another career as a result of things I see and have seen. I was told in my orientation at Fleming College that you work in heritage because you love it, not for the money. Initially, I thought to myself that this was a noble pursuit because you would be safeguarding heritage. But as colleagues began to leave the field, both from Fleming and Western, for different careers altogether, it began to hit home that this was really a tough it out kind of career to pursue. So if heritage is a field for the passionate, how are you supposed to address the cost of living at what is, some, let's face it, low wages? How far does passion take you before you start to look around and realize you aren't as far ahead as you could be? So the last question I thought about is relevancy. A colleague of mine shared the bottom left article on the metaverse not too long ago. And my first initial reaction was that I was a bit unnerved at the idea. I mean, I tried to find the benefits in this possibility, and I'm sure that the panel that will come next will go into it a little bit more. My initial thought was that accessibility for one would be addressed so long as the experience was not pared down from an on-site visit. But how many jobs would this iteration of the museum cost? And would the tangible experience of an on-site visit touted by museology and my education at Fleming and Western make as much sense if you only put on a headset to go there? This remains one of my top questions of mind as I navigate this field. So what ways do I think we need to address, what things do I think we need to address going forward? First, we need to seriously and considerately review our institutions for their approach to equity and equality. How is the content disseminated to the public, and how are the staff treated and recompensed for their work? Second, we need to be more self-sufficient and greener institutions with clear and directed investment towards cleaner sources of running our sites. And third and finally, we need to update the definition of what a museum is for the future. For me, the museum should be more top of mind to the community and speak to ongoing issues that are happening locally and around the world, so that those who visit can feel that they are being heard and actions are being enacted based on this by the institution. So thank you all for listening to my talk on my pandemic years in museums. Thank you to the CHMP and to Rodney Nelson for taking me on to give me some good career motivation and guidance in my career. If you would like to contact me, please use the email address below or check me out on LinkedIn. Cheers.
Thank you, Sean. It's great to hear about the flexibility and kind of resiliency of the industry, and that you're looking forward to the future. That's great to hear. So thank you, and thank you to all the mentees for your very, very excellent presentations. That concludes this portion of this evening. So we're going to take a short bio break. So probably, I don't know, five minutes. Come back at 10 past. And then we will begin the next session, the panel discussion. So once I end this this meeting, you will be returned to the lobby screen, and then at 10 past, you'll be able to join the second session. So see everyone there, and thank you.